Chanela, you have that, right?
Right now?
Okay. Chanela, you got that. Chanela. Chanela, you have that, right?
Yes.
Now?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. Chanela, you got that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chanela.
You got it.
Chanela, you have that, right?
Yes.
Now?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. Chanela, you got that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chanela.
You got it.
Chanela, you have that, right?
Yes.
Now?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. Chanela, you got that.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready?
Okay, perfect.
Why is this?
And hello, everyone. I'm Sade Beterenwai. I'm a news anchor at WABC in New York, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today, albeit virtually. You know, we're so used to doing this in person at the UN, so hopefully soon we will see each other. You know, today we're going to be talking about the relevance of care work and for gender equality and action for sustainability. Care work is at the center of the gender equality agenda. And around the world, women spend 2 to 10 times more time on unpaid care work than men. Care work is mostly done by women and girls. It is underpaid, so we're talking about low wages, working long hours, and not having access to Social Security benefits. And the working conditions are often poor. And that's really the best case scenario, because oftentimes women and young girls are unpaid for this care work and they do not have social protections. Their contribution to the sustainability of our society is huge. And yet in most countries, it is not recognized in its economic value. The unequal distribution of caring responsibilities is linked to discriminatory gender stereotypes and social norms that continue to hold women back in society. We are trying to do something about that today. So we're going to be delving deeper into these issues. We're going to be talking about how governments and policies are working to affect change, and spearheading those efforts. We have the government of Mexico and UN Women, who convened for a global alliance for care. Its 55 members are mobilizing policy and action that invests in a care economy to ensure economic justice and rights for women and girls around the globe. So let's open up today's discussion. And we are going to begin with Nadine Gassman, who is the president of the National Institute of Women of Mexico. And Nadine, you are a fierce gender equality champion in Latin America and of course, globally. Tell us your thoughts today.
Thank you so much, Sadie. I'll switch to Spanish. Muy buenos días a todas y todos. En nombre del Instituto Nacional de las Mujeres, de la Alianza Global por los Cuidados y del mío propio, les comparto nuestra gran alegría de llevar a cabo este diálogo con mujeres que impulsamos, cada una desde nuestras instituciones y nuestros espacios, acciones transformadoras en favor tanto de la igualdad de género como de un futuro sostenible y justo para mujeres y niñas de todas las regiones del mundo. Quiero agradecer el compromiso de las ministras, activistas y funcionarias que nos acompañan. Y saludo con mucho cariño a Ekin Deligos, secretaria de Estado parlamentaria del Ministerio Federal de Asuntos de la Familia, la Tercera Edad, la Mujer y la Juventud de Alemania, y a través de ella quiero agradecer el apoyo de Alemania a la Alianza Global de Cuidados. Quiero saludar también a mi amiga Belén Sanz, representante de ONU Mujeres en México, cómplice de esta gran iniciativa, así como Ana Huesmes, también una gran amiga y aliada y cómplice, directora de la División de Género de la Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe. Antes de comenzar, quiero compartir con mucho gusto que el Senado de la República de México ratificó el día de ayer el convenio 190 de la OIT contra la violencia y el acoso en el mundo del trabajo. Este era uno de nuestros compromisos en el del Foro Generación e Igualdad, y hoy tenemos más herramientas para que las niñas y las mujeres vivamos en un mundo sin violencia. Estoy convencida de que los análisis, discusiones que aquí tendremos van a apoyar y promover la centralidad que tienen los cuidados para la sostenibilidad de la vida, tomando en consideración que las realidades de las mujeres y las niñas están atravesadas por este trabajo esencial que sostiene, como digo, la vida, la reproducción de la fuerza de trabajo, el cuidado del medio ambiente y de las sociedades. Nos reconocemos como impulsoras de esta agenda y de una iniciativa que nació hace un año aquí en México, en el marco del Foro Generación e Igualdad, la Alianza Global de Cuidados. Como Sadi decía, hoy somos 55 las integrantes de esta alianza entre gobiernos, organizaciones de la sociedad civil, filantropías, organizaciones internacionales, miembros del sector privado y academia, con un espíritu de co-creación y colaboración que ha crecido y se ha fortalecido. Hoy los gobiernos de Alemania, Canadá, Italia, Grecia y Argentina, la Confederación Sindical Internacional, Women Deliver, la Organización Internacional del Trabajo y el Banco Mundial participan en este evento paralelo. Desde el Gobierno de México reiteramos que para continuar con los esfuerzos de recuperación de la crisis provocada por el COVID-19, es esencial coadyuvar en la transición de la situación laboral de las mujeres, apelando siempre al trabajo decente y haciendo énfasis en su vinculación con la acción climática género responsiva. La vinculación es necesaria para lograr una recuperación transformadora orientada a la sostenibilidad. Es así que los planes encauzados en lograr la reactivación necesitan, como hemos hablado en los últimos meses, impulsar acciones afirmativas que promuevan sistemas integrales de cuidados, incluido el cuidado del medio ambiente, el trabajo decente y la participación de las mujeres en sectores estratégicos de la economía. Desde México y desde la Alianza Global por los Cuidados, trabajamos para impulsar sistemas de cuidados sostenibles que tengan como objetivo central apelar a darle una respuesta a la crisis climática actual y abonar a la construcción de sociedades sanas y resilientes. La Alianza Global por los Cuidados se concibe como un espacio donde se reconoce que se puede trabajar entre diferentes sectores y que los aportes de todas las partes son igualmente valiosos, donde los diversos recursos confluyen hacia un mismo fin, que es implementar la agenda de cuidados progresivamente desde las posibilidades de cada país y desde los diversos ámbitos de sus sociedades. Sobre todo, nos interesa posicionar en los espacios de toma de decisiones que ocuparnos en construir sociedades de cuidados es un cambio civilizatorio, que nos recuerda que somos una interacción, un planeta, una sola naturaleza. Para terminar, les comparto con gran gusto que en las próximas semanas instalaremos la primera comunidad de análisis de la Alianza Global por los Cuidados, con la temática sobre el derecho al cuidado. La iniciativa se está desarrollando en conjunto con algunos miembros de nuestra alianza y pronto les vamos a mandar un anuncio, invitación y esperamos que nuestras colegas y aliadas que nos ven y escuchan se unan. Aprovecho finalmente para agradecer de corazón a todas y cada una de las integrantes de esta relevante alianza que nos pondrá más cerca de la igualdad para todas. Nos deseo un diálogo muy fructífero. Muchas gracias.
Nadine, thank you very much. Well, now I'd like to introduce Eken Delaguz, who is another champion of the CARE agenda. And Eken is the Parliamentary State Secretary to the Federal Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth, and is in charge of all domestic issues related to care. So Eken, if you can now take it away, what are you doing?
Oh, thank you, dear Shade. Thank you, Nadine, dear Bellon, dear partners of the Global Alliance and CARE distinguished participants. Normally, it would be Svenja Schulze sitting here and talking to you. She's our Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development. But as we have got the Parliament today, as she's sitting in the parliament and as a speech, it's me who's talking to you from Berlin. And I can tell you, it's a very good afternoon in Berlin. We've got a really shiny day today with a little bit of summer sun coming to us. So it's a nice place to be here and to be with you and sharing with you all our thoughts about this complex situation we are talking about. I can always say a warm welcome to our house, to our building. We are the ministry who's responsible for women's rights and family affairs. So we are basically talking and working really hard on this question of care work and of partnership. At some point in their lives, all people are in need of care. Care work, be it private, professional, or on voluntary basis, is absolutely vital and valuable to society. That is why all members of society should bear equal caring responsibilities. However, in reality, it is still the women and girls who bear the main burden. It is typically a female duty to care for children, for older people, and people with disabilities, to cook, to clean, or do the shopping. Worldwide, women and girls do 3 times as much unpaid care work as boys and men. This adds up. Over the course of their lives, they do a full 7 years more of care work on average. 7 years. This imbalance results in far-reaching disadvantage for women and girls. Not only are they faced with multiple roles and responsibilities, their earning ability is also massively impacted. Because of caring responsibilities, they have less or no time for paid work or for education and training. Care work also reduces women's social and political participation. They have less time to access information, network, or become involved. Paid care work, too, is marked by an alarming imbalance between men and women. 2/3 of the paid caregivers worldwide are women. Women are thus making essential contribution for society, yet often they receive little recognition of their work and typically their income is low. This comes down to structural discrimination. Precisely because such work is mainly done by women, it is often in the low-wage sector. I'm greatly concerned because of the imbalance in caring responsibilities being further reinforced by the COVID-19 pandemic all around the world. Again, it is women who shoulder the major part of unpaid childcare work when schools and kindergartens are closed. And women are under particular pressure and face a higher risk of infection because they are overrepresented in the health sector. Other crises, too, are increasing the caring responsibility of women. Climate change, for instance, is making it more difficult to access food, water, and firewood. In addition, climate change is threatening people's health, thus increasing the need for care even more. This all shows that the international community needs to urgently step up its efforts even more for equal opportunities and equal participation. That is why it is important for Germany, for us, to pursue an explicitly feminist foreign and development policy. Gender equality is a prerequisite for sustainable development and will therefore be the common thread running through all of Germany's development cooperation in all discussions and joint projects with our partner organizations, civil society at the international level. For us, the reduction and fair distribution of care responsibilities are key elements. As long as these responsibilities are not equally shared, gender equality will not be achieved. This is a challenge we also have to face concerning gender equality in Germany. And we have made a good experiences, for instance, by offering so-called partner month in our program for paid paternal leave after childbirth. Besides, we are continuously increasing our commitment to establish high-quality institutional childcare all over Germany. The German government has also put care work on the agenda for its G7 presidency. An international conference on care work and international cooperation will be the centerpiece of those efforts. Progress towards an equitable world. That is the theme of our G7 presidency. For Germany, this includes ensuring that care work enjoys more recognition, both nationally and internationally, and that the responsibilities are equally shared between men and women. In addition, together with our G7 partners, we want to work towards ensuring that care workers are paid fair wages in the care economy and are adequately represented in politics and trade unions. These are all key aspects for reducing the gender-specific pay gap, creating decent jobs, and empowering women. As a member of the Global Alliance for Care and the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights for the Generation Equality Forum, the German government will advocate the fair distribution of and pay for care work even beyond the G7 context. I would like to thank Mexico, Mujeres and UN Women for establishing the Global Alliance for Care and for the good cooperation in organizing today's meeting. I am eager to hear about the outcome of today's discussion and look forward to drawing on it as a foundation of which to build Germany's future engagement in this area. Thank you very much.
Again, Delegus, thank you so much. Now we want to move to Belén Sanz, the representative of UN Women in Mexico. You know, we've been hearing already this morning how much Mexico has been doing on this front. So Belén, if you could now take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sade. And it's really an honor to me to be here and for me to represent UN Women at the opening of this size event on the relevance of care work for gender equality and action for sustainability in this CSW 66. I would like to express my sincere thanks to InMujeres and to its president, Nadine Gassman, for the support and leadership for this Alliance for Care, which is really a central piece of what we are all doing to advance this agenda. I'd also like to give my regards to Erin Delegus from Germany, and to all the representatives and participants of different governments, international organizations, civil society, who are joining us today for this very important exchange. This important dialogue focuses on, as it's been said, how to ensure that the Global Alliance for Care plays a catalytic role in promoting the incorporation of the dimension of care as a driver of change for gender equality, as a driver of change for our economies, but also as a driver of change for the green economy, while promoting this transformative change for a sustainable and just future for all. I'd like to thank our great moderator, Sade Baderinwa, for her kind introduction as well, and also extend my regards to Ana Güemes from CEPAL and the ministers from Argentina, Canada, Greece, and Italy, and also our distinguished representatives from civil society, the World Bank, the ILO, and also I'd like to express my congratulations for the ratification in Mexico, dear Nadine, of the 190 ILO Convention. And also, of course, the High United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights, and also special thanks to our Executive Director, who will be joining us for the closing of this important event. As it's been said, the Global Alliance for Care is one of the collective commitments that emanated from the Generation Equality Forum and its Action Coalition for Justice and Economic Rights. The objective of this Global Alliance for Care is to assume and promote bold commitments, concrete actions, financing, and collaboration and exchange of practices around care, with the purpose of reducing inequalities and promoting a culture of transformation by guaranteeing the recognition, the reduction, and the redistribution of care between all co-responsible actors, from the society to the market and the state, as well as representation and remuneration and the recognition of the rights of the care providers. The evidence across the world shows us how the impacts of climate change deepen the unequal distribution of time and the social organization of domestic and care work, especially among rural, indigenous, and peasant women and girls, who are the main responsible for the family food, for collecting essential resources for the subsistence of households, such as water and firewood. Due to climate change, as we've been seeing across the CSW, they are increasingly forced to travel further and spend more time to find such resources, which makes harder for them to free time to study or join other income generation activities, or at the end to have free time. The leadership and participation of women and girls in efforts to respond, to mitigate, and to adapt to climate change, as well as in the care and defense of the territory, are central contributions to building a more sustainable future for all people, the future we all want. And women carers of the environment have a fundamental role in the sustainability of life and the care of the planet. Transforming the economy and moving towards a caring society that prioritizes the sustainability of life and care for the planet, and thus strengthening the resilience of women and their communities, is definitely a fundamental need of our era. The COVID-19 has forcefully revealed the centrality of care and the unsustainability of its current distribution, and that's why we are here. With the pandemic, women were the first to lose their jobs and put their careers on hold to care for their families, their communities, and society at large. So according to the words of the Secretary General of the United Nations, there is a sense of real urgency to close the gender gap and the climate change gap. And economic recovery plans must focus on women, including through large-scale investments in the care economy. So today's multi-stakeholder panel and intergenerational dialogue will allow us to listen to a diversity of voices, experiences, desires, demands, in order to propose concrete actions for our common agenda that places care work at the center of gender equality and climate actions. So we are very much looking forward to listening to all of you and to making this collective action a reality for all women and girls. Thank you very much.
Belen, thank you so much. Again, you know, as you mentioned, we're going to be talking about those bold commitments, and it's wonderful to hear people from different parts of the world figuring out how are they addressing the care issue. And hopefully we can adopt all of the great ideas. Well, now we're going to hear from Ana Guesmes, who is the Chief of the Division for Gender Affairs of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. She has consistently urged the international community to pick up the pace towards climate and gender justice and transition to a care society. Ana, tell us your thoughts for today.
Hola, muy buenos días. I switch to Spanish. Gracias, Sadi. Es un honor para mí participar desde luego en la Alianza Global por los Cuidados. Saludo a Nadine Gassman, la presidenta del Instituto Nacional de las Mujeres de México, y además por las buenas noticias que nos trae el día de hoy, que en conjunto con ONU Mujeres, saludo a Sima Bahaus, su directora ejecutiva, y a Belén Sanz, representante en México, que ya han sumado a 55 instituciones, organizaciones y desde luego a la CEPAL en esta iniciativa global. Hoy los gobiernos de México y Alemania nos convocan junto con ONU Mujeres, la OIT, la CSI, Women Deliver y el gobierno de Argentina a conversar sobre la relevancia del cuidado, del trabajo de cuidados para la igualdad de género y la acción para la sostenibilidad. Los cuidados nos convocan otra vez y esta CSW se da en un contexto de creciente urgencia y demandas para enfrentar la crisis climática, la pérdida de biodiversidad, la degradación del medio ambiente, la contaminación ambiental, y queremos colocar la igualdad de género y el empoderamiento y la autonomía de las mujeres en el centro. Les traslado un saludo de la secretaria ejecutiva de la CEPAL, la señora Alicia Bárcena, que está dejando un legado en la región de más de 14 años, justamente en lo que estamos hablando hoy, en la interfase entre la igualdad y la sostenibilidad es el cuidado, es la sociedad del cuidado. Y este ha sido el aporte del feminismo desde hace 100 años prácticamente, que hemos estado demandando paz, desarrollo, justicia, y en los últimos años hemos sumado la demanda de sostenibilidad. Hemos rescatado la importancia de los cuidados para la sostenibilidad de la vida y nunca como antes hemos evidenciado la importancia que tiene para el desarrollo económico y para el bienestar social. Quiero destacar 4 hechos de la región de América Latina y el Caribe. Lo primero es que es una región que tiene una agenda regional de género por más de 4 décadas, que ha ido colocando en los cuidados desde el principio de corresponsabilidad al derecho al cuidado, a esta idea novedosa de la sociedad del cuidado que estaremos trabajando en la próxima conferencia regional sobre la mujer que realizaremos en Argentina. Y quiero saludar a Marita Perceval, que va a estar también en el panel, secretaria de Políticas de Igualdad y Diversidad del Ministerio de las Mujeres de ese país. También esta región tiene un acuerdo en justicia, en acceso a la justicia en asuntos ambientales en América Latina y el Caribe, que es el acuerdo de Escazú, por el lugar donde se inició en Costa Rica, y que nos pone el cuidado del ambiente desde una perspectiva claramente de obligaciones de derechos humanos y de algo que es muy importante para América Latina y el Caribe, que es la protección de las defensoras ambientales. Quiero decir que hace pocos días, en la última reunión de la mesa directiva de la Conferencia Regional sobre la Mujer, las ministras y altas autoridades hicieron un llamado a incorporar la perspectiva de género, interseccionalidad, interculturalidad y derechos humanos en las políticas y programas con financiamiento, esto es muy importante, para el desarrollo sostenible, la adaptación, la mitigación frente al cambio climático, y es una contribución clara de la región que se está llevando ahora a la CSW a través de Argentina, que es la vicepresidencia de la Comisión del Estatus Jurídico de la Mujer en nombre de los países de América Latina y el Caribe. Y habla claramente de la importancia de vincular los temas relacionados con medio ambiente y fortalecer la resiliencia frente al cambio climático. Y por último, pero no menos importante, este hito que nos convoca hoy, la Alianza Global por los Cuidados, un espacio propicio para conocer y promover la incorporación de la dimensión de los cuidados en las políticas sociales, laborales, medioambientales y económicas, que surge desde México y que ahora ya nos convoca desde la región a nivel global. Quiero hablar, y lo mencionaba desde el Ministerio de Cooperación de Alemania, la importancia que tiene en términos de tiempo, pero también de valor económico. Las mujeres en esta región dedican el triple de tiempo que los hombres al trabajo de cuidados no remunerado, y ya tenemos 10 países, y esto es una propuesta que estamos empujando de la mano con ONU Mujeres, de la mano con México. No solamente toca medir el tiempo, y acabamos de aprobar en la última conferencia de estadísticas un documento, una guía estándar para medir el uso del tiempo en América Latina y el Caribe, que ponemos a disposición de toda la alianza, sino también tenemos que medir el valor económico. Ya tenemos 10 países de la región que lo han medido y 4 que han hecho la cuenta satélite del trabajo no remunerado. Esta es una región que está planteando ir más allá de las mediciones tradicionales del Producto Interno Bruto, y desde luego el tiempo y el valor económico del trabajo no remunerado es fundamental. Miren ustedes, de los 4 países que ya tenemos que lo han calculado, el aporte económico de los hogares al PIB, al Producto Interno Bruto, sería entre un 16% y un 25%. Y el 75% de este valor lo están aportando las mujeres. Entonces estamos hablando de una enorme contribución visible ahora en términos de tiempo, en términos económicos. Las mujeres estamos sosteniendo la economía y estamos sosteniendo la crisis. Pero además hay un tercer elemento. 1 de cada 3 mujeres en la región se emplea en sectores vinculados a los cuidados. La salud, la educación son sectores claramente feminizados en el mundo, pero aún siguen siendo ocupaciones con muchos menos ingresos y protección de lo que requeriríamos. Entonces, estamos haciendo un llamado, por un lado, primero a cuantificar. Hay que medir, hay que romper el silencio estadístico, que es un poco lo que hemos estado haciendo el planteamiento desde esta región, ya desde la conferencia de Beijing. Lo segundo, como lo está haciendo Europa, como lo acaba de mencionar Alemania, hay que reconocer la economía del cuidado como un sector dinamizador de la economía. Necesitamos financiamiento, necesitamos financiar, invertir en sistemas de cuidado como parte de la recuperación. Así lo están entendiendo Canadá, así lo están entendiendo Estados Unidos, así se está haciendo en Europa y necesitamos movernos mucho más en esa dirección. Corresponsabilidad y sistemas de cuidado. México está avanzando en ese sentido, Argentina, ciudades como Bogotá, necesitamos avanzar en crear estos sistemas con un nuevo pacto fiscal con igualdad de género que asegure los recursos suficientes. Por último, estamos hablando de una transformación profunda, una transformación que reconoce el vínculo entre economía, sociedad y medio ambiente. Por eso estamos planteando desde esta región a la Alianza, junto a todas ustedes, la idea de la sociedad del cuidado como la posibilidad de acabar con esta precarización de los empleos en el sector de los cuidados, fortalecer el rol del Estado desde una perspectiva feminista y poner en el centro lo que verdaderamente importa, que es la sostenibilidad de la vida. Por eso necesitamos avanzar hacia ese nuevo estilo de desarrollo que recoge el aporte del feminismo, pero recoge también el aporte de los pueblos indígenas de nuestra región, recoge el aporte de las mujeres rurales, recoge el aporte de las jóvenes y de todas las mujeres en su diversidad. Quiero terminar citando a una querida escritora nigeriana que amamos muchísimo en todo el mundo, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, que cuando dice ¿por qué todos deberíamos ser feministas? Ella dice, la cultura no hace a la gente hace a la cultura. Si es verdad que no forma parte de nuestra cultura el hecho de que las mujeres sean seres humanos de pleno derecho, entonces podemos y debemos cambiar nuestra cultura. Y sin duda estamos hablando de eso. Por eso estamos en esta alianza, porque requerimos un cambio en las instituciones, en la política, en la fiscalidad, en la cultura, y esta sociedad del cuidado es el horizonte, y como hemos conversado muchas veces con nuestra querida Nadine Gassman, presidenta del Instituto Nacional de las Mujeres de México, estamos hablando de un cambio civilizatorio que nos va a hacer sin duda mejores personas. Y estamos caminando hacia esta idea que es un modelo de desarrollo sostenible que articula igualdad con sostenibilidad, con desde luego un futuro en paz y con desarrollo sostenible en el que sin duda todas las personas vamos a vivir mejor. Muchas gracias.
Anna Guesmes, thank you so much for your remarks. You covered a lot of ground here, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper to that in our discussion today. So you're really helping set the tone here. Well, now I'd like to turn our attention to a video. And this video really captures the reality of women in rural areas, their plight, and certainly their challenges of caring for their family while trying to work, and the harsh reality of unfair compensation. Let's take a look.
Soy Emilce Valiente Chitivo, me dedico a las labores del campo, soy ama de casa y desde hace unos años soy guardapáramo voluntaria y ayudo a conservar el páramo La Cortadera. De él sale el agua que nos ayuda para sobrevivir, tanto nosotros como comunidad, nuestros animales y nuestros cultivos. Hace unos años la mujer se dedicaba a los quehaceres de la casa y hacer la comida para los obreros que llegaban a ayudar. Las muchachas de hoy en día, hablando de ejemplo mi hija, ella coge su bulto, lo echa al hombro, igual como si fuera un muchacho normal. Eso le hace ver el empoderamiento de una mujer. Las otras muchachas dicen, si ella puede, ¿por qué yo no? Gracias a ese campo que muchos menosprecian, es que en la ciudad no falta qué comer. De los productos del pueblo, vecinos y de mi pueblo, la mayoría que las enviamos es a Bogotá. Pero nos da tristeza de que uno en Bogotá no los pagan a menos precio. Los intermediarios son los que se quedan con la plata. Uno llama y pregunta a sus familiares a cómo están comprando el bulto de papa en la ciudad. Nos dicen, el bulto de papa acá lo estamos comprando a 90.000, 100.000 pesos, mientras que a nosotros como campesinos nos los pagan a 25.000, 30.000 pesos. Eso es lo que duele como campesino y da nostalgia. Porque muchos campesinos de acá, desde las 5 de la mañana hasta las 7 de la noche, trabajamos por eso. Y duele y da nostalgia ver cómo muchos campesinos de acá de mi pueblo y circunvecinos les tocó regalar sus cosechas. Todo ese trabajo y todo ese esfuerzo se quedó ahí. Al ver esta problemática, los jóvenes están yendo. No ven posibilidades de sembrar el campo porque no hay cómo. Y eso es lo que me da nostalgia. Ya los jóvenes que deberían estar aquí siendo esos líderes, esos luchadores, no están. Les tocó irse. No importa estar bajo la lluvia, bajo un intenso sol, bajo un frío que congele los huesos. Debemos seguir luchando, ser esas mujeres echadas para adelante. Y si tenemos que liderar y sacar adelante una comunidad, una familia, unos hijos, no debemos dejarnos quedar.
And moving video there, capturing our attention on so many issues, and certainly issues that we're trying to address today. Let's now turn to Elena Bonetti, who is the Minister for the Family and Equal Opportunities of Italy. And Elena, first of all, can I just have you quickly comment about the video, which was just so moving?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I agree with you. So moving and showing how it's important now to commit ourselves really to ensure freedom and empowerment and a strong role for women in all societies and in all roles of our societies. So I really agree with you. So thank you very much for this moving and inspiring video. And let me start by thank you for inviting me to participate to this event and ensuring the commitment of the Italian government to women's empowerment has a fundamental pillar at the core of our policies, especially in countering the economic and social effects of the pandemic. We should seize this opportunity and give to gender equality and women's empowerment policies, let me say, a comprehensive and ambitious framework with clear objectives and measurable progress. Now, more than ever, it is crucial to take strong actions to implement effective gender mainstreaming. In this perspective, I promoted in Italy the first national strategy for gender equality that aims to provide Italy with a complete set of policy supporting women's empowerment and in line with the European Commission strategy for gender equality. The Italian strategy was designed with the main goal of offering women and men the same opportunities for personal, educational, professional growth and development without no difference in pay or dignity. With specific reference to the labor market, this strategy pursues the reduction of the gender employment gap by increasing female participation and prioritizing the inclusion of mothers and female entrepreneurship. Planned measures include, for example, tax relief for companies employing women, subsidies for women returning to work after maternity leave and for women's businesses, extra flexibility for remote work for parents, regulations for the adoption of a gender policy in public and private companies, and the implementation of a national gender equality certification system. With regards to economic empowerment, the measures of the national strategy on gender equality aim to reduce the pay gap by facilitating women's participation and permanence in the jobs market, supporting burden sharing in caregiving, promoting skills, ensuring equal remuneration for equal jobs, and occupation of equivalent socioeconomic value, and encouraging economic independence of women. I also wish to mention that in last year, in 2021, Italy's G20 presidency addressed the issue of gender equality systematically and across the board. I'm referring the organization of the first G20 conference on women's empowerment, as well as to the various ministerial meetings, with particular reference to that of the labor ministers who adopted the roadmap towards and beyond the Lisbon target. This commitment was marked in the final chair statement of the G20 conference on women's empowerment, which recalled the strong connection between labor, women's economic empowerment, and work-life balance. This means thinking about a new balance between professional and family responsibilities, an adequate network of educational, social, care, and assistance services, efficient tools that will no longer force women to make the choice between being mothers or career professionals. I promoted also a reform, the Family Act.
And Elena, pardon me, I just want to interrupt you there for a moment, because that was one thing that I really wanted to get into was the Family Act. And I know that it was you approved unanimously by the Italian Senate that is really helping families throughout the country. You say never again can a woman have to choose between work and family.
Yeah.
So if you could just explain to everyone about that Family Act, because I know that families who have children up to the age of 21 get a certain amount of money. I think it was about 250 euros. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay, I can explain you. Thank you for the question. The Family Act is an integrated reform of the policies for families, and it is composed by 5 pillars. The first one is the financial support to family, and in particular a monthly allowance, which is already active, the so-called universal, and it is universal but progressive depending on the economic condition of the family, and the maximum level is 175 euro, but if you starting from the 3rd child in the family, it arrives at 265. Then there are also some increasing of this amount. For instance, in the case in which 2 parents work, are employed, and so to foster also women employment, and also in the case of disabilities of children. Then, and this allowance is guaranteed till the age of 21. Then there is another action concerning the educational service, and in particular a strong commitment to increase the number, the quality, and to support also from the economic point of view families to have access to all forms of educational and care services. Then a reform of the parental leaves, introducing mandatory paternity leave and more flexibility to use parental leaves, both for women and men, but also for all the professionals, not only for the employed one, but also for instance, for entrepreneurs. Then a strong commitment and action to foster women employment, because we know that to support maternity and paternity, to support families, we need to foster and to enhance women's presence and protagonism in all the sectors of our society, and in particular in the labor market. So the fact that, for instance, to ensure some benefits to mother to come to work after maternity is one point, and also to mind the gap between mothers and fathers inside the companies. And the last one is to ensure more autonomous life for young people and young families. So, for instance, to find accommodation and to start some work, and also to have access to studies, to universities, and also to project their life starting in a younger age of their life.
That's great. And I know this was implemented actually within the year. So what has been the reaction that you've seen thus far?
It is a good reaction. Italy was waiting for this kind of action, because now family policies are not considered just, let me say, social policies to fight against poverty. There is this as a good result, but they are considered as an investment. So we have a decreasing of the rate birth, and this is the way in which we tackle and which we want to fix this tragedy in our country. The allowance, the assegno unico universale, this is the official name in Italy of the allowance, the economic support for all the children is already active, and exactly in these days we have the final step for the approval of the whole reform in the parliament. And let me recall that there was no contrary votes to this reform. So really something which is unifying also the political parties towards the goal.
Yeah, and that's certainly difficult to get a unanimous decision on something like this. So it sounds like this is something that is working, and I'm sure there's much more to come. Well, Elena, thank you so much. And I'm hoping that you can just chime in a little bit later. But now I'd like to turn our attention to Karina Gould, who is the Minister for Families, Children, and Social Development of Canada. Minister Gould, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us what the government of Canada has done to incorporate care policies or programs to bring about transformative change?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Madam Moderator, for today's event. And I want to start by a big thank you to the Global Alliance for Care for inviting me to speak on a topic that is so important to unlocking the potential of people right around the world, which is the care economy. So let's get one thing straight. We all depend on the care economy. In fact, we saw in stark terms during the pandemic that we don't have an economy without care. Be that for young children, the sick, or the elderly, we all depend on caregivers, informal and formal. We also saw, though advocates have been saying it for years, that often those we most rely on to keep society and the economy going are the most undervalued, both socially and economically. I have some hope, though, that this is beginning to change. In my own country of Canada, we have decided to make two historic investments, one at home and one abroad. At home, we initiated a $30 billion Canada-wide early learning and childcare system. The objective, to provide accessible, quality, affordable, and inclusive childcare to every family in Canada who wants it within the next 5 years. In less than a year since introducing this policy, we have reduced childcare fees in half in 7 provinces and territories across the country. We have supported wage growth and professional development for early childhood educators, and we are working to expand the number of licensed spaces across the country. We still have 1 province to sign on to the agreement, but we are making intentional progress on valuing and investing in the care economy. As our first female finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, likes to say, this is feminist economic policy, which is smart economic policy. We know women have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, often carrying the dual burden of work and primary care responsibilities for family, young or old, as well as being the first to lose their jobs and the last to get them back. In Canada, we've called it the She Session. Well, now we need a She Recovery, and childcare is the key. As my Quebec colleague told me, it's a no-brainer. They are celebrating 25 years of affordable childcare in Quebec. In 1998, they went from having the lowest female workforce participation in Canada to now having the highest. And this initiative actually pays for itself because the costs of the program are more than made up in the revenue generated by the income tax of parents, mostly mothers, entering, staying, and growing in the workforce. I like to call it a home run. It's good for our kids, as the early years are the most important for their long-term development. It's good for parents, especially mothers, who have more disposable income to spend on things their family needs, and they have the opportunity to pursue further studies or grow in their careers. And it's good for the economy, because businesses and organizations quickly realized that without access to safe, reliable, and quality care, parents simply couldn't work. And the second initiative that we launched was $100 million announced by our Prime Minister at the Generation Equality Forum, specific to care in the Global South. Because we know that this is not just an issue holding women and girls back in Canada, but right around the world. And we are excited to work on these initiatives in partnership with the Global Alliance for Care to change the narrative around the importance of care work and to recognize the true value that care provides for each and every one of us.
Oh, okay. Well, Karina, thank you so much. I want to double down really on feminist economic policy because, one thing I think that is so important is for women to be in positions of power, because certainly they can help change the narrative. They can certainly change the economic policy. So can you talk about the influence women have had in these sectors, leading these discussions and leading these policies that are now impacting young women and girls in Canada?
Absolutely. So when our government was elected in 2015, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was intentional in appointing a cabinet that was 50-50 gender equal. And I can say that women at the cabinet table have made a tremendous impact on putting the care economy, feminist issues, women's issues, issues of equality and equity for equity-seeking groups front and center of our government's initiatives. We brought in gender-based budgeting and gender-based analysis into every aspect that we do in the Government of Canada. We launched our Feminist International Assistance Policy back in 2017, which means that we place gender equality at the center of all of Canada's initiatives right around the world. We have a feminist foreign policy, and we've also have a feminist economic policy, which means that we've looked at what the impact of the pandemic and other, crises and issues have had on women, on racialized groups, on people in all of their diversity, and have been very intentional about ensuring that we are creating policies that are going to create more equality and more equity. And our National Early Learning and Childcare Program is exactly that. There have been many women in Canada and around the world who have been fighting for this. In Canada, it's been a fight of half a century, over 50 years. And here we are. Now I'm the minister responsible for implementing this program. And we have families across the country who not only have access to childcare, but are seeing significant reductions in fees. And I can tell you that I'm hearing from Canadians from coast to coast to coast for whom it's making a meaningful impact. And let me just tell you one short story of a woman in Edmonton, which is in Alberta. They reduced childcare fees by 50% starting in January this year. And she wrote to me on Twitter, and she said, because of this, it means that I can put my child in full-time care as opposed to part-time. And it means that now I'm going to seek full-time employment as opposed to part-time. And this means that for my family, we're going to be better off, and I'm going to have more economic independence.
Right. I think that's a perfect example, because as we heard from all of the other speakers today, it makes a difference when you're talking about childcare, because when you look at the long term, women, because they are caring for people at home, they aren't making as much money as men are. They're unable to enter to the workforce, and they're sometimes forced into lower wages. So these policies matter, and it's great to hear that that the childcare fees have been reduced by 50%. Karina, thank you so much for your insights. Now let's move on to Maria Sarangella. She is the Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Affairs, responsible for gender equality, demography, and the family, and she is from the family of Greece. So Maria, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you talk about the role that your government is playing right now in promoting global care agenda in the context of climate action?
Thank you very much for the questions, Excellencies, honorable panelists. First of all, I would like to thank the government of Mexico and the Global Alliance for Care for the invitation to participate in today's high-level event. We should all agree that climate change and gender inequality are arguably two of the greatest sustainable development challenges of our time. Climate change affects the entire planet and all people, although not in the same way. Gender inequality, meanwhile, denies full human rights to half the population and fuels discrimination and violence. For us, for the Greek government, gender equality issues are high ranked. Care work, both paid and unpaid, is currently mostly done by women, and this only increases with a change in climate, whereas research shows that this burden also increased during the pandemic, with women spending nearly as much time doing unpaid care work as a full-time paid job. Despite its importance, care work continues to lack visibility. For this reason, the new labor law that was now is a new bill is a new law in Greece that comes from the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, incorporates into national law the directive of the European Union and of the Council of Europe on the work-life balance for parents and carers. And the aim is to share family responsibilities between men and women equally, and to facilitate women to remain in the labor market after having children or in parallel to their family responsibilities. You already said that women sometimes have to choose if they are going to have a family or if they are going to have a career. So now they can do both of them if, of course, they like to. Innovation of this bill are, among others, the introduction for the first time of the paid paternity leave since the birth of the child for 14 working days, and a 4-month parental leave for each parent with a subsidy from the Human Resources Employment Organization. Leave and allowance are doubled for single parents. The right of working parent to a flexible form of work, teleworking, flexible working hours, and not only for women, but also for men. Now fathers as well are provided with the protection of their acquired employment rights and their dismissal and discrimination due to the use of leaves for family reasons are prohibited. In the past, many employers didn't want to hire women because when the women thought that when the women have children, they will be out of work. But now, of course, they cannot dismiss them. But at the same time now, they cannot dismiss also fathers for a time period. We are completing a program called SHARE for the implementation of the quality labeling companies that apply policies of equal treatment and equal opportunities to their executives, regardless of gender, and to promote, and if these employers promote the reconciliation of family and or personal and professional life. The ministry also encourages the equal distribution of family responsibilities and professional obligations. We have now a pilot program called the Neighborhood Nannies that working parents can apply for childcare for their children up to 2.5 years old, either in their own home or in the home of a caregiver. Within the framework of promoting work-life balance, we are going to implement the creation of childcare units for infants within large companies. And these initiatives are coordinated actions through the trio of social protection, public services, sustainable infrastructure, and are definitely a great tool and also a great opportunity to participate in the making of public policy so as to engage full potential of women in the labor market and society. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Maria. And Maria, I know we had an opportunity just to speak briefly, but another thing that Greece is also working on is really addressing domestic violence in the country. Can you talk about some of the issues that you are doing for women and for protecting women?
Yes, I would like briefly to mention our work on preventing and combating gender-based and domestic violence, which is also a high priority on our agenda, and not only for Greece, but I think that globally we had a problem, especially during the lockdown because of the pandemic. We have a free national helpline, 24 hours a day. It operates 24 hours a day, 43 counseling centers throughout the country where women can receive psychological, social, legal, and also work support. And this is very important to find work support. 19 women's shelters that provide free accommodation and food to women and children, to women victims of violence, and of course for their children. Right. And the target group of all services has been expanded to include all women with victims of multiple discrimination, refugees, single parents, Roma women, women with disabilities. We have also the Council of Europe Convention on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. And this convention has already been ratified in Greece, and we have introduced modifications to the existing legal framework and the penal code. For example, now when a woman is reporting a violence incident at the police, there is an ex officio prosecution for the perpetrator. We have strengthened our cooperation with NGOs and civil society actors. We formulated educational material and organized training seminars for the authorities, especially in the Ministry of Education, for our kids. And the Hellenic Police has established also 73 stations all over Greece specialized on domestic violence. And now in cooperation with UN Women, we have also a risk assessment tool for women victims of gender-based violence and domestic violence, a study also on the profile of perpetrators of domestic violence, and many, many informative and awareness raising campaigns.
Okay, Maria, thank you. You know, all of those issues are just so crucial as we're also talking about care initiatives. And you're right. I think with COVID, many countries really reported high cases of domestic violence. And I know that there were a string of killings that were pushing domestic abuse cases into the spotlight in Greece. So it is good to hear what the country is now doing. And if I'm not mistaken, you were also granting some sort of stipend. You are giving certain women a certain amount of money a month. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, we give an amount to women and men concerning the for the nannies of the neighborhood nannies for the care work, so they can have a carer in their house, or especially that will be in the villages that there are not many kindergartens. A woman or a man, of course, will be a care worker for 2 or 3 infants.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. But if I'm not mistaken, aren't people who are victims of domestic abuse, they're also able to access funds as well from the government?
Yes, of course, especially all the women that live in the shelters, they take an amount of money every month so that they can stand on their feet, as if I can say. But most important for me is that they can find a job. Because according to our statistics, a number of women that are victims of violence and are coming in the counseling centers, they are highly educated, and at the same time, they are unemployed. So we have a program with the Human Resources Employment Organization for these women to find a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All those things are important. So you're giving them money to stabilize their lives, to say, hey, get out of that bad situation, but also we're going to give you the tools that you need to move forward on with your life and getting those jobs. So all great things. Maria, thank you so much for sharing your insights on what Greece is now doing. Maria Sarangella. Now I'd like to move to Chitty King, who is the chief of the ILO Gender Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Branch from the International Labor Organization. Chitty, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shadi, and very warm greetings to all of our distinguished participants. And do allow me to congratulate the government of Mexico on the ratification of ILO Convention 190 on violence and harassment in the world of work. And this is really wonderful news.
Yeah.
ILO, yes, indeed.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of ground that you want to cover, but I know the newly published ILO report, Care at Work, highlights some of the positive developments in relation to care leaves and services, but you say that there are significant gaps. Can you talk about those gaps? What are they, first of all?
Okay, so well, maybe let me start with a startling figure, and that can show you really, truly the gaps. So over 2 million mothers left the labor force in 2020. And that was, of course, the first year of the pandemic. And increased difficulties in balancing an already too heavy workload, or too heavy share of unpaid care work with income generating work was a big part of that picture. And this brought the total number of women being out of the workforce actually in 2020, aged between 25 and 54 to 113 million. That's really quite a staggering figure. And you've heard from others, before me, just what a significant role that burden of unpaid care responsibilities plays in affecting women's chances when it comes to the labor market. So this particular report on care at work presents findings based on a survey of 185 countries. And it looks at progress over the past decade on maternity protection, paternity, parental, and other care-related leave policies, as well as childcare and long-term care services. And it takes the ILO's conventions and recommendations on maternity protection and workers with family responsibilities as a benchmark. And what we found was that whilst there has been some good progress in national care leave policies and care services in terms of better conformity with international labour standards in particular, but also the recognition of men's role in caregiving, there are still significant gaps. So in terms of the good news, 120 countries now meet or exceed the 14-week minimum standard on duration of maternity leave, which is set out in the ILO Convention on Maternity Protection, which is 23 new countries since 2011, lots of facts and figures here. And a total of 123 countries now offer fully paid maternity leave. But despite this good news, millions of workers are still falling outside of legal protections, especially those who are self-employed, those who are working in the informal economy, migrant workers, and adoptive and LGBTQI plus parents. And we know that 649 million women still have inadequate maternity protection or no protection at all. And at the current pace, it will take at least 46 years to achieve minimum maternity leave rights in the 185 countries that we looked at. Another large figure, 1.26 billion men live in countries with no entitlement to paternity leave. And where there is paternity leave, it's much shorter than maternity leave. And the take-up rate is often very low, which of course compromises efforts to redistribute care responsibilities as well as men's rights to and responsibilities for care. Another finding was that 57 out of 178 countries provide for early childhood education and development programs for children aged between 0 to 2 years in their law. Only 89 countries, grant public long-term care services for older persons in their legal frameworks. And indeed, these services often remain inaccessible or inadequate to the great majority of those who need them worldwide. So just to wrap up, what these figures show us is that a continuum of care leave policies and care services is absolutely fundamental and urgent to guaranteeing the best early start for children and income security for families. But proper investments in care, adequate investments in care, could generate up to 299 million jobs by 2035. And by adequate investments, we're looking at investments equivalent to around 4.2% of total annual GDP, which does sound high, but part of this could be offset by an increase in tax revenue from the additional jobs and income, increased income created. And we heard this very clearly, indeed, from the experience of Canada. It would also boost women's employment in quality, decent jobs significantly, given the persistent segregated nature of labor markets. And the quality of jobs is essential here. Care jobs, we've heard it throughout this event, are highly undervalued. And we know that those working in the care jobs with the poorest working conditions and pay are often overwhelmingly women of color, migrant women, women from LGBTI plus communities, and women from poorer socioeconomic backgrounds. And their right to organize in this respect is absolutely crucial. So the pandemic has made it crystal clear, if it wasn't before, that there's a compelling rights-based and existential case for investing in transformative care policies that offer high-quality care services with decent working conditions. But we know, we've seen with our own eyes now, that an economy, let alone a society, can't function and be sustained without adequate care provision that guarantees the well-being of those who provide and receive care. So the primary question we should be asking ourselves really is whether we can afford not to care rather than whether we can afford public care provision.
Well, a lot of good insights, Shitty. I'm just blown away by some of the figures that you threw out there. 649 million women have inadequate maternity leave rights. And actually, if we contribute to adequate care policies, you could generate 299 million jobs. That is significant. So it pays for a country to invest in these policies.
It absolutely does. And, there's increasing evidence of this. As I said, we heard the direct experience from Canada about what introducing, their policies on care and availability of care has done in terms of transforming women's chances, when it comes to the labor market and when it comes to securing decent employment. At a time when economies, societies are struggling to recover from the devastating health and socioeconomic consequences of the pandemic, it seems to make absolute sense to invest in care. And of course, there's that very strong human rights angle to all of this. It's essential for the promotion of gender equality, for gender equity, and for addressing, the very often compounded discriminations that we see in the labor market when it comes to gender intersecting with other identities, such as race, such as migration status, such as socioeconomic background.
Well, you are right on all fronts. Chitty King, thank you so much for all of your insights today. And next, I'd like to invite Siobhan Vipon, President of the ITUC Women's Committee and Executive Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress. Siobhan, thank you so much for joining us. And you say the right to care does not exist globally, and that needs to change. Talk about that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sita. It's such an honor to be here for this important discussion. First, I just want to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from Ottawa, Canada, which is the unceded and never surrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabeg peoples. And when we're talking about that right to care, that has to be an integral part of this conversation. And we need to acknowledge also that Mexico is on the path of that to be embedded in their constitution. And so congratulations on that, as well as obviously ratifying C-190. We hope in Canada to follow suit soon. Just to share with everyone, the ITUC is a global union movement, and we represent 200 million workers worldwide and 80 million who are women. And that's in every sector of our society. And we have identified the care economy as a priority to avert the global care and health crisis as highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic, but definitely not new to many of us. And so when we look at it as care as a right, we can move this conversation from care being a nice to have to a right. And with that comes a push for what is needed and what is needed to make that happen. So we need to talk about investment, which is at least 4% of our GDP. We need to talk about decent jobs, which is the creation of 270 million decent care jobs. And we need to talk about those jobs being decent work for all care workers, including those in the informal economy, and of course, equitable access to public quality care, as well as health services. And so there's a few concrete examples I'd love to share with everyone that have been achieved so far, in addition to what I said about what's happening in Mexico. And so thank you for that. And in India, when we are affiliate Siwa, which is entirely led by women, and they're operating a childcare cooperative in urban and rural areas. And what's really interesting, I think, about this example is that it's women workers in the informal economy who benefit from these childcare services, since this is their way they can access paid work, they know their rights, and their children benefit too. Because as we know in the childcare work that we do, is that children who participate in early childhood education are, it leads to better health outcomes, as well as, these young girls have a better chance of going to primary school. And so at a national level, Siwa's lobby and advocacy is now focused to increase the public investment in full day quality childcare for up to 1% of their GDP. Recently, unions in the Dominican Republic celebrated, after a long time, lobby and advocacy work to ensure a work-life balance for women workers through the ratification of ILO Convention 156, which is on the reconciliation of work and family responsibilities, which every speaker here has identified as part of the challenge we have in front of us. Unions in Spain successfully engaged in lobby and advocacy around care and social dialogue, leading to a government decision to increase public investments in public care with 600 million euros. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, unions around the world in dozens of countries successfully engaged in social dialogue and collective bargaining, which resulted in either pay raise for care and health workers, access to social protections for informal care and healthcare workers, or PPEs for care and health workers, which was so integral. And then, of course, in Canada, we heard from Minister Gould the fantastic road that we have really started on here towards a universal childcare, which helps families and it helps women. And we think that is, we're on the right path there. And we also want to build on what we have learned during this pandemic around long-term care and all of those other parts of the care economy, which we need to look at that conversation. And so now we're pushing to have a commission on care so that we can look at it in a wholesome way. And I think you said it after the just recently, which is, this is good investments. This is the right type of investments, not just for gender equity and building a world for all, but it's actually just a really good economic investment. So and I think when we house that in the right to care, then we can have these conversations starting on the right foot. And I know at the ITUC, we are engaging with unions continually from the South and the North to deepen our understanding. And our next session of the Women's World Conference is going to be concentrating on these issues, which is, our care economy around a gender transformative and inclusive just transition for a green and caring world. And I think that is what we need to do, is to build that world.
Yeah. No, that sounds, you're right on point with that. And I think having that commission care certainly says, okay, how can we expand that? How can we address these issues at large? And one of the things I really want to talk about also with you is about fighting for the right to care in terms of good jobs, because good jobs that are well-paying, that come with it, certain access to, like we were saying, Social Security benefits. Can you talk about that? Because if you really don't stop that, then you're just really doubling down on pay inequity.
You're absolutely right. That's what happens if we don't take this moment to actually build this correctly. And so when we look at good jobs, it's in the ILO recent report that Cheetah talked about, and talks about those 5 R's, right? And so we're talking about to recognize and reward this work. And so we need to acknowledge that this work has value, and it's not women's work, and it's not work that takes advantage of. It is integral to every other job that exists in our economy, and we need to do that.
So how do we do that? How do we do that, Siobhan? Because everybody is saying, well, these are low-level jobs, only women are doing it. So it's really about changing the conversation and changing the perspective. And sometimes that's difficult to do. So how do you think we go about that?
You're right, but there are policy solutions. You're absolutely right. It isn't just think about it in a positive way. Women who are in unionized jobs are more likely to be paid appropriate. And so that means the government, we all have a role to play, government, employers. And so that means the investments that are made in the care economy need to come with a strings attached in the sense that it cannot be to further double down, as you were talking about, on low paid work. It has to come with a raising the bar on what these jobs are. And that is something that exists in our childcare framework that's happening in Canada. But that's one of the mechanisms. But when people are unionized, they also can speak up and not accept the jobs that are happening. And so governments have a role to play absolutely with the investments that they are making in jobs and in this economy, so that we recognize the good work that it is.
Okay. Siobhan, thank you so much. It was great having you speak with us today. Now I'd like to move the conversation forward with Amanda Deborselli, and she is with the Global Lead for Early Childhood Development at the World Bank. And Ms. Deborselli, you know affordable childcare is a big issue in any country. We've been talking about that throughout this discussion. What do you see as the entry points across sectors that can be used to promote quality, affordable childcare?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And thank you so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure to represent the bank in this important conversation and with such terrific panelists representing so many different aspects of this discussion. So I think it's important to start by saying, as other panelists have, we absolutely need new and more finances for childcare, right? Yeah. We can't do it unless we increase public finance for childcare. But there are many different ways we can increase that finance, and there's a lot we can do within existing budgets and sectors to target money that could be used to support childcare. So I want to talk through 6 kind of specific sectoral entry points that come to assure it's affordable and available, especially to those most in need. So the first entry point is really kind of skills training programs and jobs and employment programs. And there's 2 ways that we need to think about this. First, we need to ensure that childcare is available to women to participate in skills training programs and jobs programs so that they are able to attend and get the full benefits from them. And second, we need to think about these skills and jobs training programs as opportunities to train the childcare workforce and support women to become entrepreneurs to open their own childcare centers. So in many countries, especially in low-income countries, the vast majority of childcare is provided by women in their homes or in small community centers. They're sort of private or non-profitly run enterprises, and we can support women and train them to deliver a quality service and support them also with the business skills and finance they need to roll that out. So many countries, like when I look across the World Bank's portfolio, we have major job skills training programs in pretty much every country in the world, and those are an important source. We have a terrific example of in Liberia. It's a program called the Empowering Adolescent Girls Program, and it was running for about 10 years, training women in a variety of sectors. And we, about 5 years ago, integrated childcare and early childhood as a sector that women could be trained in, and we've had incredible results. More than 90% completion, more than 90% employment in the childcare sector 6 months after graduation, huge increases in savings, terrific increases in sense of empowerment and reductions in intimate partner violence. These programs work if we give women the opportunities to enroll and participate, and then give them support to open their own childcare centers afterwards, or work in childcare centers. The second sector is education, of course. So we know from the evidence globally that even a preschool program that is just 3 or 4 hours a day contributes to enabling women to work. And there's evidence from a number of different countries, Mozambique and many other countries, showing this, that if we make preschool accessible, women are able to work. It also helps older siblings, especially girls, stay in school or stay in employment. But if we design preschool intentionally and childcare intentionally to think about the needs of working parents, and in particular working women, we can get a lot more out of it, right? So about 60% of the children in the world have access to preschool right now. But in low-income countries, it's between 20 and 25%, right? So there's still a huge need to grow that sector, the preschool sector. But if we design it in a way to think about it as also fulfilling a childcare need, we will get more out of those investments. We will enable more women to work. And we have a number of countries there where we're working to expand, about 50 countries worldwide where we're working with governments to expand access to preschool and childcare. But the other piece of that is it has to be quality childcare. So there's
Yeah.
a really important role with different sectors. Sometimes it's the
And Amanda, I think we lost you for a second.
Ministry of Women, sometimes it's social protection or education, to make sure these programs are. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I hear
you were breaking up a little bit, but you made a really good point about, you know, children having access to quality childcare, because I actually came across a statistic that says nearly 350 million children lack quality childcare in the world. This is significant. So it's not enough just to have it, you know, it's got to be substantive. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, I'm calling in from Kenya and we're having a few power cuts today.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you for bringing up that statistic is from a report we wrote called Better Jobs and Brighter Futures, Investing in Childcare to Build Human Capital. And we released it about a year ago. And the idea is to say, childcare is not just for children. It's not just for women. It is a central investment for countries to build human capital. And yeah, you're exactly right. We estimate that there are at minimum about 350 million children around the world. That's more than 40% of all children in the world below the age of primary school entry who need access to childcare but do not have it, right? So that is based on female labor force participation rates. So it's actually probably a dramatic undercount because it doesn't count people who can't enter the workforce because they don't have access to childcare. You will not be surprised to know that 8 out of 10 of those children are located in low and lower middle income countries, right? So this is not this is a problem in every country, but it is also a problem that is disproportionately impacting poor families in low income countries. And the quality piece that you asked about is so important because all parents want the best for their children, right? They're not going to want to put their children in a place that doesn't look safe and doesn't look stimulating and doesn't look like it'll benefit kids. So we really need to work through the education sector or the social protection sector, whatever sector there is in the country, to support that agenda to make sure these are quality programs that help children development. And I'll do the last 4 sectors really quickly. So it's nutrition. There's a ton of nutrition money around the world right now, and nutrition costs are huge in terms of what child care centers spend in their budgets. And they are great places to reach children with the nutrition they need. Agriculture, in a lot of countries, the sort of agriculture extension workers are already working with the target families that we would want to work with. And there are a lot of great examples of mobile creches or rural childcare programs. Support for micro, small, and medium enterprises. So when we looked at a lot of the COVID-19 recovery plans in countries, they're prioritizing getting support to entrepreneurs and micro and small enterprises. We should prioritize childcare business owners in that context. They need that support. We've heard today how vulnerable the sector is. And then the last sector is cash transfers, right? So these are programs that are already targeting the most vulnerable families in countries. And if we can make sure we use those social registries to reach those most vulnerable families with extra support to be able to afford childcare and the information they need to be able to make informed choices for their children's care, that again will get us an extra return on our investments. So again, thanks so much for having me today, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Amanda, thank you so much. You know, time is moving so quickly, and I know I have a couple of other people to get to, but I know the executive director has another engagement that she has to get to. So I'm going to bring her on now, Seema Sami Bahus, who last September became UN executive director. She's the women's 3rd executive director. So Seema, I just want to welcome you into your new role. And I know women around the globe are so excited for your leadership and where you are going to take the organization. I'm sure you're going to take it to new heights, advancing the cause of women. So we are thrilled to have you with us here today. So if you could just tell us, first of all, about your excitement in this position and what you're hoping to do. And also if you can just conclude this event for us.
Thank you very much, Sade, our moderator, for your kind introduction and also for steering today's high level event. Before I start, let me just say my profound gratitude also go to the governments of Mexico and Germany and to the Global Alliance for Care for hosting this session in the context of 24-hour around-the-clock generation equality at CSW 66. I also thank the government of Mexico and Nadine Gassman, president of the National Women's Institute, for the strong partnership as conveners of the Global Alliance for Care and for her efforts to position care work at the center of the national policy making. Also, I commend all the distinguished speakers today for your insightful contributions to this event and the Alliance's membership for your commitment and the impressive achievements since the Generation Equality Forum in Mexico and Paris. Before I begin, allow me to stress my and UN Women's unwavering solidarity with our partners and all women and girls of Ukraine. I fully align myself and UN Women with the clear position of the Secretary General himself, who said that war in Ukraine must stop, and we must collectively hold ourselves accountable to deliver to, for, and with women and girls, be they inside or outside Ukraine. And we tell them solidarity. Excellencies, today's discussion has shown the relevance of sustainable care systems to tackle climate change and build resilient societies. We have heard from you how the Alliance must strive for care work to be at the heart of a feminist COVID-19 recovery and secure care as a human right. There is also a need for normative changes for care work to be better supported through policy, social norms, and attitude change. And this will be one of my priorities going forward. As you discussed, the need for a holistic approach to care and climate change, one that prioritizes people over profits, that expands gender-responsive climate action, and builds resilience to economic and environmental shocks, is another of my priorities. Excellencies, CSW 66 provides us all with an opportunity and a unique opportunity to mobilize multi-stakeholder engagement and promote investment at scale in care systems and care systems solutions. This aligns with the strategic priority identified by the Secretary General in our common agenda related to facilitating women's economic inclusion, including through large-scale investment in the care economy and equal pay, and more support for women entrepreneurs. Transitioning to low-carbon work will rely on a dramatic expansion of care work. If managed through a gender and human rights approach, this has the potential to generate transformative change for women and the planet. This also to help generate transformative change for women and the planet rests as one of my priorities as well. Yet, this cannot happen at the expense of unpaid and underpaid care providers. In this sense, the Alliance has a critical role to play in raising the standards and conditions of care work and protecting women's human rights in the care workforce. Dear partners, I thank you all for making this high-level discussions so relevant to the purposes of the 5-year Generation Equality Agenda. And I call on new stakeholders to partner with us in this global alliance for care as we tackle the sustainable development challenges of our time. Together, we can ensure that this alliance drives increased public and private investment, delivers concrete, game-changing results for women and girls, and triggers positive multiplier effects across all the sustainable development goals. I thank you.
Seema, thank you so much. And it's wonderful to see you here. And hopefully we'll see each other in person next time.
Hopefully, yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Seema. And I know you've got a collective clap from women around the globe in this new position.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the women around the globe. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you again, Seema. Well, now I'm going to turn our attention back to some of our other speakers that were lined up, because I know Seema has something else that she has to attend to. So again, we thank her for her time. Now let's go to Maria Cristina Percival, and she is the Secretary for Equality and Diversity Policies for Argentina. And she's going to share with us her reflection about what countries can do and should do to introduce care policies that can positively impact women's lives. Maria, thank you for joining us.
very much, Sage, and thank you for this kind invitation to participate in this inspiring conversation, to share common commitments and challenges. I switch to Spanish. Buenas tardes, qué alegría encontrarlos en esta agenda que pone los cuidados en el centro de la conversación de la comunidad internacional y en la prioridad de los estados. Me pidieron que en breves minutos fuera tomando de las inspiradoras intervenciones que fuimos escuchando puntos que pueden ser imprescindibles, que resultan imprescindibles para orientar decisiones de políticas en los estados, pero también de los cambios culturales que debemos impulsar en nuestras sociedades y en toda la comunidad internacional. Nadine, muchísimas gracias por tu liderazgo, gracias México por esta formidable alianza global de cuidados que junto a UN Women tiene en esta decidida y estratégica agenda un horizonte de igualdad. En las palabras de Nadine Gassman, felicitaciones por la ratificación del convenio 190 de OIT. Un punto, Sage, es que todos los estados ratifiquemos este convenio 190 de OIT, junto a Argentina, México, llega a ser el país número 12 en ratificación de convenios. Que esta alianza global de cuidados sea una ferviente defensora y promotora de la ratificación de este convenio. Por lo menos los miembros activos de nuestra alianza. Felicitaciones porque al decirnos México que está construyendo acciones afirmativas para fortalecer un sistema integral de cuidados, no hace sino poner en la responsabilidad de los estados la generación de sistemas integrales y no solo de políticas aisladas de cuidado. En Ekin de Ligöls, de Alemania, el eje es la corresponsabilidad. Este es otro fundamento sustantivo de las políticas de cuidado, esta corresponsabilidad en las tareas y trabajos de cuidado remuneradas y no remunerados. Pues es esta corresponsabilidad un principio que pone eje en la igualdad, al mismo tiempo en el principio del reconocimiento de las tareas y trabajos de cuidado remunerados y no remunerados. En Belén Sanz Luque, de UN Women México, un abrazo, Belén. Realmente, ¿qué nos trae Belén? Una componente fundamental de las políticas que es la interseccionalidad, porque las políticas de cuidado van a ser un motor de cambio si no son homogéneas, si no son de un solo enfoque, una sola dirección, sino que dentro tienen la diversidad y la interseccionalidad imprescindible para expresar la pluralidad de mujeres, rurales, indígenas, afromigrantes, LGBTI, y que de esta manera es cuando todas, todos, todes estamos en el centro de las políticas, es cuando podemos construir una sociedad de cuidado. Ana Güemes, querida CEPAL, estamos sintiendo que en cada una de estas palabras está expresada la brújula y la orientación necesaria para construir políticas de cuidado. En la agenda regional de género, los principios de corresponsabilidad y poner al cuidado como derecho, esto que marcaba nuestra querida amiga de Canadá, que no es solamente un acto de buena voluntad, sino que tenemos que comprenderlo y concebirlo como un derecho. Una agenda regional basada en el derecho al cuidado para ir hacia una sociedad de cuidado. Importante, en las políticas de cuidado, el acceso a la justicia e inspirarnos en el Acuerdo de Escazú, la exigibilidad de los derechos humanos y la protección de quienes defienden los derechos humanos. En esto también, pues, poner el énfasis que Ana puso en la Alianza Global de Cuidados, en donde hay una relación directa, virtuosa, entre medio ambiente y economía, entre políticas de desarrollo y trabajo decente, y en esto el cuidado cobra una importancia fundamental. ¿Qué pasa con las mujeres? ¿Qué pasa con las mujeres? Los tiempos que dedicamos al cuidado, las características de los trabajos de cuidado, la precariedad, la informalidad, pero también el valor económico, el aporte al PBI de los países. Y volvemos a decir con CEPAL, rompamos el silencio estadístico. Es imprescindible reconocer no solamente la economía del cuidado, sino también en que este sector va a ser un sector absolutamente dinamizador de lo que nos propusimos en la Agenda 2030 de Desarrollo Sostenible. Elena Bonetti, muy bueno, tomo de ella que una política nacional de cuidados, un sistema nacional de cuidados no basta, que necesitamos un planeta que cuide, una comunidad internacional comprometida con el cuidado. Por eso, felicidades por haber llevado al G20 no solamente el tema de igualdad de género, sino también poner en el centro de las discusiones los trabajos y tareas de cuidado. Voy rápidamente a María de Grecia. Nuevamente, en los principios de corresponsabilidad aparece un principio fundante de las políticas que diseñemos e implementemos. Conciliación, conciliación. ¿Cuánto necesitamos las mujeres, las feministas, seguir trabajando para conciliar el trabajo remunerado con las vidas cotidianas en los espacios domésticos convivenciales en donde somos casi excluyentemente responsables del cuidado? Es decir, erradicar la discriminación, erradicar esta sobrecarga injustificada que tenemos las mujeres y disidencias en las tareas de cuidado. Para ello, infraestructuras sostenibles, servicios accesibles, sistemas de protección social sólidos. Voy a Ailo, Chidi King, gracias. Cómo ponemos en diálogo las convenciones e instrumentos de OIT, en diálogo con CEDAW y sus recomendaciones y con toda la arquitectura de derechos humanos de Naciones Unidas y el sistema interamericano. Siobhan Vipon, del Congreso canadiense, felicidades. Felicidades por traer también en la Convención 156 de conciliación. Y un tema, ayer estábamos lanzando formación a mujeres y disidencias en los espacios sindicales, porque necesitamos sindicatos. La defensa de los derechos sociales no se hace individualmente. Necesitamos una sociedad organizada y movilizada para demandar, reconocer y ejercer los derechos sociales y económicos y culturales. Así es que, en este sentido, más mujeres en los sindicatos, más mujeres en la política. Los cuidados, una cultura del cuidado y políticas de cuidado requieren que el feminismo logre, construya, exija, anhele paridad, paridad para la igualdad en todos los ámbitos y espacios de decisión. Sima, bueno, muchas gracias como siempre por ser quien lidera esta UN Women que tanto necesitamos y soñamos las mujeres del mundo entero y especialmente las del sur global. Solo les digo, desde Argentina, gracias, las esperamos en noviembre, aquí, para esta conferencia regional de la mujer que la CEPAL y ONU Mujeres inspira y que nos mueve no solamente a los estados, sino a esta vibrante movimientos de mujeres, disidencias, feministas, no solamente para anhelar un mundo mejor, sino para construirlo. Las esperamos en noviembre y esperemos ya tener en Argentina no solo una fortalecida mesa interministerial de políticas de cuidado, no solo terminado el mapa federal de cuidados que estamos haciendo con la CEPAL, no solo avanzando en el trabajo decente de las mujeres trabajadoras en casas particulares, que es el sector de actividad que más concentra mujeres y que son las informales y las precarias, que vengan a Argentina en esa primera semana de noviembre y que podamos decirles que los dos proyectos que el presidente de nuestro país anunció el 1 de marzo, que enviaría al Congreso, ya no solo sean una ley en mi patria, sino también una realidad efectiva para todas las mujeres. ¿Por qué? porque estos dos proyectos son el Sistema Integral de Cuidados y las licencias igualitarias para cumplir con los 128 días de licencias para personas gestantes y 90 días para personas no gestantes. Las esperamos. Espero que con estas realidades, con este compromiso renovado, ningún país se salva solo, ninguna mujer logra éxitos individuales porque nuestro compromiso es con la igualdad de todas, con una sociedad del cuidado, con un horizonte para la recuperación sostenible. Las esperamos en Argentina, en la 15ª Conferencia Regional de la CEPAL, Uno Mujeres, y con las voces de las feministas del sur global, por una sociedad del cuidado, porque nuestro horizonte es la igualdad.
Maria Cristina, thank you so much. And thank you for your voice. And again, we are working all together. This isn't just what Argentina is doing, and that's what this Global Alliance for Care is all about. You know, it's so inspiring hearing from all of you women today. Now I'd like to bring someone else in this conversation. We have Amar Nijawahan. She is a women's rights policy specialist at Oxfam Canada, and also a gender equality youth leader. Amar, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you so much for having me, and a big thank you to the Global Alliance for Care for convening this really important discussion.
Well, first of all, you are a youth leader. Tell me, you know, what are the youth thinking about in terms of these issues?
Well, I think it's really clear that a lot of these issues are interconnected. You know, the world is sitting at a longstanding care crisis, similar to what everybody on this panel has been talking about, but it's also being compounded by this growing climate emergency. There's a newly published report coming out from Oxfam showing us that despite this, you know, efforts to address climate change have often paid little attention to gender equality and the dynamics of care, and the initiatives to address inequitable care responsibilities have been rarely considered when we're talking about the issues and challenges posed by climate change. And I think one of the things that we've all spoken about on this panel, but youth activists are speaking to, is that, you know, care work isn't a burden. It's a social good that needs to be invested and valued in. And we don't want to reduce the care for people. We actually want more of it, and we want it to be better supported by government and employers. And when we're talking about the nexus between care and climate interventions, you know, some of the research from Oxfam shows that, you know, climate interventions without taking a strong care or a strong gender analysis can reproduce some of the problems that have come up with development strategies in the past, including things like gender insensitivity or adopting binary approaches to gender, and, you know, bureaucratizing engagements to avoid the deeply rooted power relations that sort of sit at the fundamental part of when we're talking about care. So, you know, when we talk about the 5 R's of care and our responses and our policy responses, you know, it's really clear that we need to center care workers and carers in the identification, design, and implementation and evaluation of, you know, economic policies, but specifically climate initiatives, to ensure that these gender transformative outcomes are brought when we are looking at these initiatives jointly. But speaking to your question from the youth angle, you know, I see links between these types of representation. You know, I think we need to speak about how do we build synergies between the Global Alliance for Care and these multilateral bodies and the climate justice movement, who are often, which is primarily driven by youth actors and youth perspectives. You know, how are climate actors and young people being brought into multilateral spaces, and how can these mandates grow, taking into account the needs? I'd like to draw attention to the Youth Manifesto, a young feminist manifesto that was released at the Generation Equality Forum last year by young feminist activists in the global North and in the global South, who were feeling quite tokenized in these spaces despite being on the front lines of these crises. Young people in my generation, we're going to experience the brunt of the climate crisis. Young people are also givers of care and receivers of care. So how do we bridge, you know, these actors together in this movement? Some of the big challenges that were brought out in that Youth Manifesto last year was that, you know, there's a lack of clarity and role in some of these processes. A lot of the agenda setting is done from a top-down perspective where methodologies and timelines don't fit to what we need to do. There's also unclear decision-making processes, and how are we actually taking the weight of young people's opinion in a lot of these discussions? So I'd like to end with, who are in these spaces? How can carers, care workers, and young climate actors be brought into these conversations? Can we start? I love that we're in digital spaces, we can connect all across the world, but when we start going back in person, how can we shift the physical sites of these convenings? I'm inspired by the African feminists right now in Nairobi who are holding their own CSW 66 gathering, recognizing some of the limitations in accessing these spaces. How do we make these forums and these dialogues more inclusive for youth? And at the end of the day, youth are leading transformative social change. They mark more than half of the world's population, and we are going to experiencing the brunt of these crises in our lifetimes. So that's
yeah, you make a lot of good points there, Amar. So, what do you think going forward? Do all of these young activists need to hold like some of these leaders accountable and saying, listen, we are going to be affected more than any of you. So you need to start hearing our voices. Do you now need to create some sort of channel between yourself and maybe, the head of UN Women? Do we need to have a conversation with the young actors in this space, meeting with some of the members of Canada? How do you think that we can address those needs?
Like I mentioned, I think a lot of these channels are being formed. I think these issues are being raised. I think having more young people, not only just attending these conversations, but again, as a part of the agenda setting and in decision-making spaces, making sure these opinions are actually carried and not, just heard. We are really grateful that, the Generation Equality Forum prompted a lot of these conversations, and I think they're going to be built upon as we see them. But just including more young people and climate justice actors is really, really necessary.
Okay, Amar, thank you. It was great hearing your perspective and certainly the perspective of our youth. Well, we are going to wrap up today's event, but before we do, we are joined by video from Ilse Brands-Harris, who's a representative from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And Ilse will explain to us why human rights standards should center to the care workers and to those who depend on care to live a fulfilling life. Let's listen in.
Excellencies, colleagues and friends, the rich and valuable discussion at this side event shows the importance of the topic and the commitment of the participants. I share your strong support for the Global Alliance for Care and its aim to build care systems worldwide that reduce inequalities. The human rights to health, education, and social protection for all are recognized in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights and subsequent international and regional human rights treaties. Irrespective of age or any other status, we all have the right to enjoy an adequate standard of living and, when needed, access to care and support. This means that care is not an act of charity. It is a matter of rights fulfilled. Lack of affordable and quality pre-primary education deprives children of the quality start they need to develop their full potential and denies parents, particularly mothers, of equal access to work. The absence of community support services and respite care may lead to institutionalization of, among others, persons with disabilities and older persons, where they may face heightened risk of infection of communicative diseases, abuse and even violence, and deprivation of autonomy. Providing care is a shared responsibility between men and women and is also a responsibility of society as a whole. Still, we often take for granted that these critical services be provided for free or at very little cost by women and girls. The responses to the COVID-19 pandemic have only exacerbated this inequality, while neglecting the protection of the rights of caregivers and compromising the provision of quality public care services. Also, we should remember that caregivers themselves have care needs and rights. They may be child carers attending sick family members. They may be older women caring for their elderly spouses or grandchildren, or they may be young single mothers with disabilities raising children. This means that we must invest in gender-responsive public services that meet international human rights standards and that reach the most vulnerable, including those who face intersecting forms of discrimination. We must break the gender stereotypes which assign care responsibility only to women and girls. And we must protect the rights of care workers and unpaid caregivers. Gender equality in care and a human rights-based care economy would lead to dignified life for all. I count on the leadership of the members of the Alliance to advance feminist care agenda as a win-win strategy for gender equality and the rights to care for all. Thank you.
And I think that is a great way to wrap up our discussion today. I want to thank everyone. This has been a robust discussion. Beline, I see you there. Thank you so much. Nadine, Siobhan. Does anybody want to throw out any final comment about today?
Well, thank you, Saint, for a wonderful conversation. You had a very good role in making it lively. I want to thank everybody for their participation. And I think what we have here is this incredible energy to go forward and continue growing the Alliance, putting this issue on the agenda and making a difference for women and for the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Siobhan, I got to get you in there because you were just so lively also, you know, talking about the needs of women. We've got to raise those salaries. We've got to make it more, these care jobs more important, the perception that people have about these jobs. So we got to activate. The right to care is a human right. That's what you say.
Absolutely. And I think this global, this is the right body. We have women in all their intersectional existence in positions of decision making, so we can have these conversations. And this, let's do this together. And yeah, because we can create a world that is more just. And we've heard from everybody about the role that we can play in that. So I'm very excited that you've let us do this conversation and the work that we will do together so that we can embed the right of care in every part of our society, because that will be the world that works for everyone.
Absolutely. And I got to bring Canada, your other a person from Canada back in the conversation, because, we were talking about women in positions of power. I'm a strong advocate about that, because when you get women in positions of power, they are going to change policies that are actually impact women. So does anybody else, just want to comment on that? We got to get more women in politics.
No, absolutely. If I may say, I just wanted to really acknowledge the depth of this conversation. And as you say, what we've heard today from many different examples, countries, experiences, is that really paying attention to care is at the center of our transformation to a more just and inclusive world. So I think that the evidence shown is very clear about that. And I certainly would like to echo what Nadine said in terms of bringing more partners to the table. As the UN Women Executive Director invited other stakeholders to join this collective endeavor. And really, women in leadership positions can make a difference, as we are seeing in all these countries that are putting in place collective policies on care. So thanks to everybody on our behalf as well. And we are very excited to continue this very deep conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Beline. The work is not over yet. Again, I'd like to just thank everyone for participating today, all of the speakers. We really appreciate your insights on what you're doing in your corner of the world, helping to change the conversation and certainly helping to elevate women. Again, I'm Sade Bedaranois from ABC7 in New York. It was a pleasure to be here with you today, and onward and upward. We've got a lot more work to do. So let's go get them. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Sade. It was wonderful.
Oh, good. Ladies, you were all, not that it's